Stop looking for the truth in a guru. Stop looking for it in a book. Stop looking for it in a very expensive course that promises that if you memorize the 7 laws of the universe, the portal will finally open for you. The woman who hypnotized more than 8,000 people over 5 decades, who spoke with souls outside the body, who documented extra-dimensional beings speaking through cleaning ladies and truck drivers from the American heartland, that woman, before dying, left one last message. And the message was not a new secret. It was not a cosmic map. It was not an exotic revelation. Dolores Cannon's message was a controlled demolition, a demolition of everything you believe about enlightenment, about awakening, about finding answers out there. In the next few minutes, you will understand exactly why most people spend their entire lives hunting for a master and die without ever having sat with the only one who truly matters. And you will understand the biological and energetic mechanism that keeps you anesthetized, seeking outside what is already imprinted word for word in your own nervous system. Before 1968, Dolores Cannon was an ordinary woman, wife of a U.S. Navy serviceman, mother, housewife with no academic training in psychology, no spiritual lineage, no mystical background. Nothing about her suggested that she would become, decades later, one of the most respected researchers in the field of consciousness. That year, almost by chance, she and her husband took part in a hypnosis session aimed at treating a woman with weight problems. The technique was conventional, therapeutic, predictable. But something escaped the script. While the patient was under deep trance, she began to describe vivid details of another life, centuries earlier, with historical accuracy that no trained imagination can fabricate without preparation. The woman spoke of streets, names, trades, with an accent that was not her own. And there in that small, unceremonious room, the switch was flipped. Dolores looked at her husband looked at her, and both understood, without needing to say a word, that what had just happened did not fit within the frame of the world they had brought into that house. What most people don't realize about this story is that Dolores did not have an epiphany. She had an anomaly. And it is this distinction that changes everything. An epiphany is emotional, lasts minutes, and vanishes with the next phone notification. An anomaly is a fact that doesn't add up, a fact that remains there at the back of the mind, corroding the coherence of everything else. Dolores did not leave her life behind because she fell in love with spirituality. She left her life behind because once you see a fact that doesn't add up, you can no longer pretend it does. Her consciousness, from that instant on, began to operate under a silent and relentless pressure to find out what that was, not in books, in the sessions, in direct, replicable, testable experience. And it was this stance, more clinical than mystical, that made her something the self-help market almost never produces. An investigator, not a saleswoman. In the following decades, Dolores developed her own technique, a technique that wasn't content with taking the patient to remember childhood, traumas, past lives. Her technique was built to cross those layers and reach a deeper stratum of the mind, a place she came to simply call the subconscious, but which has almost nothing to do with the subconscious of classical psychology. This subconscious, in her vocabulary, is something more like an observer from within the flesh. An observer who knows why you were born with that specific father, in that specific city, with that specific body, and who knows with frigid precision what the organism before it came here to do. Thousands of sessions. Thousands. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands of people from different continents, different ages, different cultures, different creeds, entering deep trance and from a certain depth onward, beginning to repeat, with minor variations, the same structure of message. And that is what gives weight to her work, because when one case is dramatic, it's an anecdote. When 10 cases converge, it's a coincidence. When 10,000 cases converge, you're no longer in the territory of fantasy. You're in the territory of a pattern. And patterns, when repeatable, tend to point to something that is structurally true about the system that produces them. What she heard, session after session, was a consistent version of the following. There is a continuity of consciousness that does not begin at birth and does not end at death. There is a learning trajectory of this consciousness through multiple incarnations. There are dimensions, planes, layers of reality that are not accessible through the five common senses, and there exists, for each soul, a kind of plan brought from before birth, a general script with room for improvisation, but with clear goals. It wasn't religion, it wasn't doctrine. It was, in her view, geography of consciousness. And that is how, without fanfare, with a therapeutic method given a proper name and hundreds of trained professionals around the world, Dolores Cannon built her authority, not by shouting, not by selling, by documenting. And that is why her last message caught so many people by surprise. Because when someone spends 50 years collecting extraordinary revelations, you expect the final message to be another extraordinary revelation. You expect a map. You expect a code. You expect that last secret kept for the end. And she delivered the opposite of that. She delivered the dismantling of the expectation itself. Dolores Cannon's last message, in essence, was this: everything you need to know to live the purpose for which you incarnated is already inside you. Not on some higher plane, not in a spiritual guide you need to hire, not in a secret technique she took to the grave. Inside, printed in the subconscious structure of that very stratum she spent decades accessing through hypnosis. And the only reason most people never access this content, she said, is fear. Not laziness, not lack of a master, not lack of money for the next course. Fear. A chronic biological state that keeps the nervous system vibrating at a frequency incompatible with inner listening. Okay, it's worth rereading this because it seems simple and it isn't. What she's saying from the point of view of someone who understands the physiology of stress is this: the human body has two general modes of operation, a mode of expansion and a mode of survival. Survival mode narrows the perceptual field, focuses on the immediate external environment, silences the subtler layers of consciousness. It is useful if a lion is chasing you. It is catastrophic if the intention is to listen to an internal intelligence that communicates in delicate signals. And the average adult of your generation, whoever you are, was trained from childhood to live in survival mode, disguised as routine. Traffic, bills, news, performance demands, constant comparison with filtered strangers. You don't feel acute fear. You feel a background tension, a physiological white noise that does exactly what the lion would do, silences the observer within, and as long as he remains silent, you will keep looking outside for the map that was delivered at the moment of birth. From this conclusion, Dolores organized what many of her students and readers later synthesized as 4 pillars of transformation. They are not mystical laws. They are radical distillations of everything the subconscious minds of the thousands of people she hypnotized repeated with an almost tedious consistency about what a soul needs to do to reclaim control of its own life. The first pillar is releasing the past. And here you need to understand something technical. Releasing the past, in her vocabulary, does not mean forgetting, does not mean forgiving without processing, does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means stopping the reenactment. Every time you retell at inner volume the story of what was done to you, you're not resolving it, you're engraving the same neural circuit more deeply. The past, in physiology, does not exist as inert memory. It exists as a firing pattern. Every time you trigger that pattern, the body produces the same hormones, the same cortisol, the same inflammation, as if the event were happening now. Releasing, in her sense, is interrupting the reenactment. It is letting the past be the past. The second pillar is forgiveness. And forgiveness within this architecture is also not what most people think. It is not saying that everything was fine. It is not reconciliation with whoever hurt you. It is not a moral gesture turned outward. It is an energetic gesture turned inward. As long as you internally maintain the bond with whoever hurt you, in the form of resentment, in the form of revenge fantasy, in the form of pending justice, you remain energetically shackled to that person, to that scene, to that version of yourself. Forgiving in this context is cutting the thread. It is releasing not the other, but yourself. And the soul, according to the account she collected over decades, cannot rise to the next layers of purpose while it is shackled like this. You can do everything right on the outside, meditate, read, pay for therapy, and remain trapped because the thread was not cut within. The third pillar is to love unconditionally. That is the most chewed over phrase in Western self-help, and at the same time, one of the least understood. What Dolores meant, cross-referenced with what the subconscious minds described, is that unconditional love is not an amplified feeling. It is a removal of conditions. You love your children with conditions. You love your partner with conditions. You love yourself with especially severe conditions tied to performance, to weight, to productivity, to appearance, to how many millimeters your life is, from what you saw in the feed today. Removing those conditions is slow work. It demands lucidity. It demands courage to look at how many hidden clauses exist in the contract you have with yourself. But every clause removed releases an absurd amount of biological energy that was being spent on judgment, on surveillance, on trying to deserve. That released energy is exactly the fuel the soul needs to begin acting in the world with clarity. The fourth pillar is remembering who you really are. And this one of the four is the strangest to hear and the most important to understand. Because what hypnosis revealed, when people reached the right depth, is that they were not the personality. The personality was the costume used to get through this specific life. You are not your name. You are not your profession. You are not so-and-so's child. You are not the result of your school grades. You are not the number in your bank account. None of that is you. You are the consciousness that is using this body, this story, this city, this time, as a backdrop for a specific stage of learning. Remembering who you are in this sense is interrupting for moments the reverse hypnosis that society placed you under since childhood, a hypnosis that convinced you that you are the mask. And every time you remember, even for seconds, the whole body reorganizes, posture changes, voice changes, decisions change, because the one who chooses has stopped being the mask and has become the wearer of the mask again. That connects directly with the fifth point of her work, one of the most misunderstood and at the same time most comforting. According to the accounts gathered session after session, many of the souls incarnated at this moment in human history are not here by chance. They chose before being born to take part in this specific period, a period of transition, of shifting collective frequency, of dismantling old structures and birthing new ones. And here is the piece of data that changes how you read everything you have already lived. The hardships of your life are not a manufacturing defect. They are not punishment. They are not a detour gone wrong. They are planned catalysts. It was exactly these experiences, exactly these pains, exactly these collapses that made you wake up from the automatic sleep in which most people live without ever questioning. The soul chooses the fastest path to remember. And the fastest path to remember is almost never the most comfortable path. This does not romanticize suffering, and it is important to be precise here. We are not saying that pain is good. We are saying that pain, when read as a signal, is data. When read as identity, it is a prison. The soul that came to catalyze did not come to suffer eternally. It came to cross the densest layers and then transmute that into something that serves others. There is an abyssal difference between suffering that teaches and suffering that freezes. One lasts as long as it has a function. The other settles in as furniture. And part of what Dolores said, based on what the subconscious minds repeated, is that many people remain in suffering years beyond what is necessary because they did not receive the instruction that they are already allowed to leave, as if the soul were waiting for permission, and she gave it, through the sessions, that permission. You can leave now. You have already completed this stage. You no longer need to keep proving that you can endure. The final lessons, the ones she synthesized in her last years, revolved around three pillars. The first is death. And she didn't approach death with the comfortable euphemism of self-help, nor with the terror of traditional doctrine. She approached death as transition, a transition of state, not an extinction. Of the thousands of cases she documented, the pattern that repeated, session after session, was that of souls describing physical death as an almost administrative passage, a change of vehicle, without prolonged pain, without absolute forgetting, without arbitrary judgment. The anguish of death in her reading was the anguish of the personality. The soul knew everything was fine. The personality, clinging to the body like someone clinging to a burning house, was the one that suffered. And understanding that, while still alive, changes your relationship with everything else. Because when the greatest fear is deactivated, the smaller fears lose scale automatically. The second pillar of the final lessons is identity, and here the message is harsh, almost clinical. You are not what you have. You are not what you do. You are not what you achieved. You are not what you accumulate. The entire civilization taught you to add things to your identity and to present yourself by the sum. Name, surname, title, salary, credentials, followers, city. None of that, in deep consciousness's reading, is you. It's scenery, it's costume, it's context. And when you begin to present yourself internally by something else, when you begin to silently name to yourself that you are the consciousness that is here living this phase, the external world loses the dictatorial power it exercised over your peace. Not because the world changed, but because the axis of identity moved from the exterior to the interior. And from the interior, the exterior is merely landscape. The third pillar of the final lessons is the least discussed and the most consoling. No one is alone. Not in the conventional religious sense, in the structural sense. According to what she documented, every incarnate consciousness here has, on the other side of the veil, a support network. Guides, mentors, family members who have already departed, higher aspects of the soul itself, layers of support that are present at all times, waiting to be acknowledged. Not invasive, because they respect free will. Not silent, because they send signals. Synchronicities, dreams, intuitions that appear in the shower. Sentences you read and feel as if they had been written for you. The network is there. What is switched off usually is not the network, it's the receiver, and the receiver was switched off by decades of noise, of stress, of manufactured urgency, of permanent listening on the wrong side of the channel. That's why in her final cycle, she insisted so much on very simple daily practices, not complex systems, not grandiose rituals. A small period of silence each day, done on purpose, without a phone, without music, without hidden productivity in the middle. A long, slow, conscious breath, done not as an exercise but as an invitation for the body to understand that, in that specific moment, there is no lion. An internal conversation, conducted in a low voice or merely mentally, addressed to your own subconscious. Treating it as a real interlocutor, not as a metaphor. An open question, formulated with clarity, left in the air before sleep, and upon waking the care of not looking at the phone immediately, to leave room for the residue of the night, to translate into intuition, into image, into direction. They are practices almost boring in their simplicity, and it's exactly that simplicity that most people reject, because the vain mind wants complexity, wants credentials, wants social proof. The soul doesn't need that, it needs silence. The legacy of Dolores Cannon, then, is not an elaborate cosmology. It is not a closed system, it is not a brand. Her legacy is an invitation, made with the rare authority of someone who listened to thousands of mouths repeat the same thing, without prior agreement. And the invitation is this: to abandon fear as your foundational identity, to recognize that your very essence is not the constructed personality, and to remember the reason you came into this world, in this body, in this time, in this place. None of it is written out there, none of it will arrive by notification, none of it is resolved by the next course, the next retreat, the next book. The work is internal, it is continuous, and it is urgent in the most literal sense of the word, because every day spent in survival mode is one less day of listening to the intelligence that came with you when your body was assembled in your mother's womb. And here is where most people close the video, feel a warm emotion, promise themselves they will start tomorrow, and tomorrow wake up repeating exactly the same biochemical pattern as the day before. The body is lazy by design. It wants to conserve energy. And conserving energy for the body means repeating the same thought, the same feeling, the same reaction. That is why Dolores Cannon's final message is, at its core, a request for absolute responsibility. She will not come back to wake you. No guru will, no book will. The instruction has been delivered. Only one question remains. Will you close this tab? Let the body repeat tomorrow everything it repeated today, and keep searching outside for what is already printed within? Or will you do one small thing today, within the next few hours, to begin interrupting the pattern? 5 minutes of real silence. One honest question asked of your own subconscious before sleep. A moment of silent forgiveness toward a person who still handcuffs you from the inside. An instant in which you stop introducing yourself internally by your title and introduce yourself by your consciousness. Just one choice. No audience, no stage, no proof for anyone, because the portal does not open in the collective. It opens one by one, and yours, if you want it, opens today. If you understood this message, comment below the phrase "I already have the answer within." Not as engagement, as a command. As a silent commitment that, from today on, you stop outsourcing your listening and take on the only work Dolores insisted until her last breath on placing back into your hands.